you know, Santa Cruz County. So thank you very much for starting it and enjoying it very much too. So thank you again for all coming. I'm part of a team here from AMEC Costa Mueller. We have Dan Durand, who is our CEQA principal, who is here. I'm a CEQA project manager for this program, and Eric Leachman is our lead project manager on this program, as well as a GIS specialist and many other things. So we're all happy to be here as part of the management team working on the CIR. So just to go over some basics, this is our agenda for today, and we want to cover some things with you, but we really want to get into the breakout sessions. We don't want this to be formal. We want to really engage in dialogue with you all and have good conversations. And so feel free too to roam around between the different tables that Kyle identified. So first we've done our introductions. We'll talk about what the EIR scoping session is. We'll give you, Eric will give you a project overview. We'll talk about next steps. And we'll also talk, as Kyle mentioned, the comment period end date will be the last one. All right, so we did those introductions. So again, I think a lot of you are probably familiar with the California Environmental Quality Act. Projects that are considered discretionary, such as changes in laws, legislative amendments, and discretionary projects are subject to CEQA in this state. And what CEQA is it's a disclosure document. It doesn't approve, it doesn't deny a project. It simply discloses a program or a project's potential to have physical effects on the environment. And when a lead agency determines that the potential is high, perhaps, if there should be a significant effect, they will typically perform what's called an environmental impact report, which is a more robust analysis that includes a review of alternatives to projects as well, which this program proposes to do. So again, what is an EIR? It discloses information about the project. It identifies mitigation measures. It looks at alternatives, and it provides public forums such as this. It provides opportunities for public dialogue to talk about whether the EIR is appropriately scoped, whether the alternatives are appropriately scoped, whether the resources that we propose to identify, we meaning the lead agency, are the right resources, and whether the proposed undertaking, the way to approach analysis is appropriate. And it must be certified prior to project approval. So although the EIR does not approve or deny a project, it's required to be certified under state law before a program or project can be adopted and put into effect. Okay. An EIR is an informational document. With that, decision makers should consider the facts of the EIR. They should consider public testimony as well as their staff's recommendations, and then they have the authority to approve, deny, or modify a project. Where there are significant effects, there is a statement, a finding that a decision maker must make. It's a finding of impacts, and it's also, if they want to go forward and approve a program or project, and there are significant effects, they must make what's called a finding of override considerations, which means that they acknowledge there are potentials for significant effects, but on balance, there is some public merit, public welfare, general benefit that overrides those significant effects. So this slide pretty much shows you what the EIR process is in a nutshell, and where the star is where we are today. We prepared the notice of preparation. We're having a scoping workshop to look at the comments you have on our approach to the EIR. Then we'll conduct an environmental review considering those comments. And again, the comment period is 30 days, so you have time still to make your comments. And then we'll release what's called the draft EIR, or public draft EIR, and that will be about a 45-day review period. It can't be any less. So we're targeting 45 days. After public comment and review, the lead agency as well as our consultants will consider the comments and
here yet. You'll see him when he gets back. He's up at the printer right now upstairs, so he's here as well. We wanted to give you just a brief overview of what the project is all about. For many of you, you've received a copy of the notice of preparation that has a description of the project, but for those that haven't, or to get a step back and look at this from the big picture, we want to give you a brief overview of what we're looking at. The project is basically a set of policies and regulations, and it includes a licensing program to allow for the commercial cultivation of cannabis in Santa Cruz County. And within Santa Cruz County, within select areas and zoning districts. That's kind of a key mechanism of the whole program, is that it selects portions of the county where cultivation of cannabis is eligible, and also by default, it acknowledges places where it wouldn't be eligible. Through these set of regulations, the project would address the type, the location, the size, the intensity, and the overall design of the site, of the cultivation site, consistent with the regulations. And because there's a lot of different features, a lot of different factors to the project, the EIR is going to look at two different scenarios for cultivation. One of them is the proposed project, which has a certain set of regulations, and also a different scenario that's a more permissive project. So by changing the regulations to be more permissive, it allows for more cultivation in more locations throughout the county. So the EIR is actually looking at two different project scenarios. It's an important thing to keep in mind moving forward, because you can provide comments and input on both of those scenarios to ensure we look at all the resources and all the issues that might come up under each one. Also, it addresses manufacturing of cannabis products to a certain extent, where manufacturing is currently allowed in the county. So acknowledging that that's a kind of an integral part of cannabis cultivation and cannabis products, and that's something that the EIR is going to look at as well. As I mentioned, there's two different scenarios that we're looking at in the EIR. One of them is the proposed project, and I think for our team's purposes, the easiest way to think about this is geographically. So on a map, when we actually put the regulations on a map, I just realized it's a little light in here. Is there a way we can turn off the overhead so we can see the detail a little bit?
I can definitely move it for you.
There we go. That's a little bit better. Also, the posters that Dan is moving right now, these are printouts of these slides. So if you want to walk up to them and look at them a little bit closer to see how the project is manifesting on the map, that could help out once we break out of the presentation here. But I think the takeaway of these maps is that for each scenario of the project, they manifest differently geographically. In the proposed project, the green areas that you can see on the map here within the county, the purple boundary being the whole of Santa Cruz County, are areas where cannabis is technically eligible, where if somebody proposed or applied for a license, that there would be a kind of baseline level of eligibility. In contrast, in the more permissive project, you see the green area is a little bit more. There's more areas in the county where eligibility would be kind of a baseline condition, where a license would be considered by the county. And so this is what, in the EIR, we're looking at, is how these two project scenarios are similar, where they differ, and what the environmental impacts would be of cultivation within these areas. How this information really, where it matters, is that it helps determine what the scope of the EIR is, what the resources are that we look at, and what issues we delve into to disclose and to analyze how this project would have an effect on the environment for a wide range of issues. The EIR is going to consider not just these maps, but the action itself. The project proposes the adoption of the licensing program and the regulations. And to be specific about this, just in case anybody needs these details, it involves the adoption of a new ordinance in the county code. Specifically, the repeal of an old 7.128 and an adoption of a new Chapter 7.1.28, which contains these regulations. So again, if you're looking for details on those projects, there are copies of this available online. We have information tonight if you want to actually get down into the details of the ordinance. And that's where the proposed project lives. Also, I should mention that in addition to the adoption of the ordinance, there's also a couple other actions that would have to occur in order for the project to move forward. There would have to be an amendment to the general plan and local coastal program, and also a change to the zoning ordinance itself to make cannabis cultivation an allowable use countywide. In the EIR, as I mentioned, there's a wide range of issue areas that are looked at, and this is required under CEQA, that for any resource that could potentially be affected, that we look at it, analyze it, and disclose what the potential environmental impacts would be. For this project, we have up here the range of resources that we know we're going to be looking at. Those include the aesthetics and visual character impacts to the community, agricultural impacts, forestry impacts. Say, for example, changing crops, loss of crops, change in agricultural, resources, or loss of forested land, that type of thing. Air quality and also greenhouse gas emissions related to the cultivation of cannabis. Biological resources and cultural resources, where there's potential for damage or impacts to those resources, creeks, streams, that sort of thing, habitat areas. Also for geology and soils, I think one of our main things that we know about right now is to look at the effects of grading, the effects of slope and things like that that would come up related to cultivation. Also hazardous materials, the use of them, and what happens when you use hazardous materials on site, where they go, how they affect the environment. That's related to hydrology and water quality, where the streams and creeks and watersheds of the county will be looked at. Land use and planning, public services, and utilities are all issues related to provision of those services in the communities that we live in. And last one is other CEQA issues. I wanted to mention other CEQA issues specifically because issues related to transportation, noise, and population and housing would be looked in that section. So even though you don't see those issues up there, there is a place for them to be addressed. So if you have comments on those topics, we'd love to hear about them as well. And last but not least, an EIR is required to look at alternatives to the project. So as I mentioned, we have two scenarios that we're looking at as the proposed project, but we also want to look at viable alternatives to those. And that's something we would appreciate your input on tonight, about what other things to look at, what are the things that we should study in the alternatives to ensure that we've considered a suitable range of options in the EIR, so to provide the full range of information to decision makers when we get to that stage. So the best way to go about this is to provide comments. By comments, we mean just let us know what you're thinking, what topics you're interested in, and there's a variety of ways to go about that. You can provide written comments, as Kaya mentioned and Rita mentioned. We have comment cards here tonight. Feel free to fill those out. Tom's holding them up right there, and there's a Dropbox basket on the table on the way out the door. You can also submit a written letter to the county or an email to the county. And also tonight at each table, we have staff members that are going to be taking copious notes. If there's anything in particular you want to get down on those notes tonight, feel free to join us at a table, talk to us directly, and we'll be incorporating those into the EIR as well. With regard to comments, I think I wanted to make this point and make sure everybody understands where we are with this. We're looking for comments on the scope of the EIR. How your comments are most helpful is to be focused on what we should analyze. In contrast, the merits of the project, or whether you agree or disagree, those are helpful and good to hear about. But at this point in the process, what we're really looking for is what should the EIR study. So those comments on the issues that we've talked about, or other issues that you didn't see up there, would be most interesting to us tonight. So we also mentioned that we want to give you details about how to comment. You can comment tonight, of course, but if you want to go home and think things over and prepare a letter or an email, feel free to do so and submit that information to Matt Johnston, who just walked in. He's right here. His email is matt.johnston@santacruzcounty.us, which is up here. Or if you'd like to mail a comment letter to Matt, the address for the county building is up on the screen here as well. This information is available on the project website as well, so feel free to hop online if you need to check those details. And also, because we're working under statutory deadlines, the deadline for comments that we received is March 15th. So by 5 o'clock, if you could have your comments to us, that would be most helpful, and make sure those will be incorporated into the scope of the EIR. All right, so just for next steps, so you saw Rita's timeline about where we are. We're very early in the EIR process. This is one of the first steps that we do. And what you can expect coming up is that we're going to be accepting comments through March 15th. We'll be looking at and evaluating potential impacts in the draft EIR through spring 2017, so into spring. We'll be publishing the draft EIR in about June 2017. That's when you can start to look for it on the streets. And that'll be subject to a 45-day review period between June and July of this year. You can expect the final EIR with a response to all the comments and edits related to, in response to public comments, in about August, and then the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission will have hearings in September, October of this year to consider the whole of the project, including the conclusions of the EIR. So plenty of opportunities to stay involved, and I hope you do. So thanks for attending. This website's very long, but if you Google the Santa Cruz County Cannabis Licensing Program, it comes up. I'm sure I've done it many times now. So.
Or if you just go to the planning website, the link to the
Yes,
homepage.
yeah, on the homepage. Great, and also, just so you know, everybody who's here at 4:30, we're gonna break out into sessions so you can talk to us. As I mentioned, we have different tables. I'll repeat what we're doing here. At this table over here, if you have concerns about infrastructure and public services, so parks, water, wastewater, those types of things, this table would be a good place to start. At this table here, we have environmental resources and natural environmental resources. That's biological resources, ag, forestry, geology, hydrology, those types of issues. Back here at this table, this is if you have questions or need information about the program itself, or questions about the details, how it would work, that sort of thing. That table's here to answer your questions. And last but not least, over here, this is the land use and planning, so community-related issues related to land use, planning, neighborhood issues, that sort of thing. And of course, these are loose guidelines. You can talk about whatever you want, but if there's something specific you like to talk, this is where we have our experts on those topics, so we can answer your questions. We'll also be keeping this presentation at 6 o'clock for anybody who has come in after work. So yeah, I think what we should do is let's break out into sessions unless there's any direct questions. Oh yes, thank you. Just last introductions. We have staff from the licensing office here tonight at this table too. So if you do have questions for licensing staff, we have Dan and Loretta here at this table. And Michael. And Michael. Michael showed. Where's Michael? There's Michael.
Then I just have one more comment. It's really important for everybody. What we do with your comments is they go in the back of the EIR. They're all numbered, and it'll say, you'll say, I want this looked at. It'll say, see section 2.2.3 of biological resources, and you can go and see that your comment was responded to. It won't be direct. It'll talk about the issue and explain the issue or analyze the issue you bring up. So, but that way we create a public record that we have heard you, listened to you, and done our best to respond to you, and then you come back and say, well, you guys missed the ball. I asked you to do this and you didn't do it right. So there's a record for you to follow up on as well. We pride ourselves on this, but it's important. That's why written comments are so helpful to us, because they're your words, not our transcribing your words. But we'll do whatever we can to address your comments. And so this is the first round. Eric can make clear, there's another round where you comment on the draft EIR. And we have to do the same thing in the draft EIR. We respond to those comments, we make changes to the EIR as Rita indicated. So the whole point of CEQA is to deeply engage the public in disclosure of environmental impacts, crafting of mitigation measures to reduce impacts, and developing the alternatives. So I think that's why we like working under this law, because it's really a public involvement law. So that being said, Paya, you got a comment?
Yeah, and last point is that tonight we're talking about the content of the environmental impact report. Tomorrow, the board is having a public hearing that's about cannabis issues more in general, and that's at 10:45 in the morning at 701 Ocean Street.
There's a question.
I have a question. So in CEQA, there's the responsible agency, the lead agency, and the trustee agencies. Who are they in this case?
That is a great question. That's a great question. So, when CEQA, that's right. To repeat the question, CEQA identifies a lead agency, a responsible agencies, and trustee agencies. In this case, the county is the lead agency. They're responsible for the environmental impact report and also the discretionary action that's happening. The responsible agencies are agencies that have a vested interest in the resources that we were discussing in the presentation. So, for example, with biological resources, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife would be a responsible agency. They have some jurisdiction over certain aspects of that topic, and that would be an agency that would comment as a responsible agency who has some sort of jurisdiction over the topic.
So do you have a list of those agencies?
They should be in the NOP or the NOP. If not, we can provide them. Regional Water is another good example.
Yeah.
Regional Water is developing a pretty comprehensive program. I don't think they have their permit matrix developed yet, but they are strongly enforcing water quality provisions. So the EIR will certainly provide a complete list of responsible and trustee agencies. Oftentimes Fish and Wildlife is a trustee agency because they hold the resources of the state for trust for people, but here they might actually issue permits in some instances as well. So we'll try and clarify all that. I don't know if the NOP yet has gone into that
I
depth.
don't believe so, but the EIR will provide
Yeah.
that. And if there's any input that you'd like to provide on that side, that'd be very helpful as well. And last thing, I just wanted to mention, for anybody here who is either a cultivator yourself or you have an interest in cultivation, or know somebody, we have an anonymous cultivator survey at the table on the way out. It's just a few questions. One thing, as environmental professionals that we're finding about this topic is that there's not a lot of information about it. I think we can know that. Anonymously, of course, if there's any information you'd like to share with us about your experience or your interest about cultivating cannabis in this county or elsewhere, this would be a great opportunity to share some info with us and help us understand what the key issues are as a business owner, as a cultivator, as an agriculturalist. All these things are important to our understanding of the project and the impacts of it. So feel free to fill out a survey, drop it in the basket along with any comments. We really appreciate that.
I think too, what would be very useful is if you're sort of at the cusp of deciding whether to just continue on or not, we'd be interested to know, or what are those main key concerns you have? So that type of information would be very useful.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Feel free to let's break out, and I think we'll take our place at the table.